So, good evening and welcome back to my podcast where I cover the IDAHO4 case, otherwise known as the case of Bryan Kohberger. And my name is Swamp Rose. And I have a special guest with me tonight. So, if my audience could please welcome my good friend AR. I've dragged him out of bed to do a live stream with me.
You did. You talked me into it, and here we are. Here we are again.
Well, it's nice to see you. I haven't seen your face on YouTube in a little while, and I just want to get your take on a few things that we've seen recently, and glad you're here.
It's good to see you again. Always enjoy working with you, so it should be fun again tonight, I'm sure.
So, and we already have a few people in the chat. Thank you so much. It's nice to see you, Stormy. So AR, have you read any of the documents that have came out in the last 24 hours regarding the case?
I can't say that I've read them, but I did cheat before I hopped on this with you and listened to a few other people going over them, including yourself. So I've got a little bit of knowledge so far, but I'm sure we're going to discuss it. We're going to catch it running, and we'll learn it as quick as we can.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, so AR and I really want to keep this to be a short live stream, just kind of go over some of the more the points that everybody is talking about. So I really brought up just two major talking points, but I have the documents and I think you actually might want to read some of this verbiage. But the first thing I want to bring up to you, which I just really want your take on if you haven't heard this, is there apparently was indications at the crime scene that somebody cleaned up. And I think that that changes a lot of things. So what I was going to do is read the quote for you and then maybe speculate on exactly what they could be talking about as far as something that was cleaned up. And I have a couple thoughts on it. So I don't know, any initial thoughts on it, or have you read that part of the paperwork yet?
I've heard a little bit about it, and Kiki, I think you and I have discussed this over the long term, that we felt as though something like this could potentially be a part of this. And, I hate to say it, I've had rumblings in my ear through the past 6-7 months behind the scenes talking about some of these very things that are coming out now that we'll be discussing together. But I knew some of this prior to these documents coming out. So looking forward to going over this document with you and hearing your take. And then hopefully you can read it, though, because I can't get past the beauty of the birthday girl. I mean, I can't read documents with birthday girls sitting in front of me.
Oh, thank you. Always so charming, AR. I will definitely read the document, but yeah, I mean, we've heard so many things alluded to in open court that have taken our breath away, and then now we see them coming out in the documents. Oh, it's so good to see a few more people in chat. But yeah, I knew you had told me that you had heard some things that were coming out, and I know you haven't broke your silence and told me exactly what they were. So I'm anxious to see what you said. I should say that last night, this story actually was brought to us by Twiz. He tweeted this out while we were actually live streaming. So I should give him credit for pulling this out of the new paperwork. Okay, so the document that I'm reading with AR right now, you guys, is called, I don't want to get the name wrong. I don't want to do it from memory. It's called Order on Defendant's Motion in Lemony regarding vague and undisclosed expert testimony. And right down here, so there, well, I'm going to go to the first time they mentioned the word. All right. So under section F, where it says, let me change my highlighter. Under section F, Darren Gilbertson. Let me make sure I got this one right. All right. Yeah, I just want to make sure because there were several. I want to make, okay, here it is. Okay, defendants. I wanted to make sure because this term was mentioned several times, and it's only referencing the crime scene in two of them. So defendants disclosed expert opinions from Brent Turvey that more than one assailant was necessary to accomplish this crime in the time frame alleged. Specifically, he asserts that one, there was direct and indirect evidence that attempts were made by the suspect or suspects to clean up the crime scene after the homicides, which would have taken far longer than the time interval alleged by the state. And two, there were multiple weapons against Kaylee Gonzalez, and Xana and Ethan appeared to have been attacked at the same time. Turvey, and that's from his report on page 20. Though his other expert, Rachel Orr, defendant, has also submitted evidence that he suffers from developmental coordination disorder, which has resulted in deficits of fine motor dexterity and visual motor function. His attorneys have argued that other motions of these deficits render it not possible for Mr. Kohberger to have acted with the speed and coordination required to commit these crimes in the time frame alleged by the state. However, this has not been disclosed as an opinion of any of the defendant's experts. And there's one more quote regarding that down here. Whether Detective Gilbertson's opinions were relevant will depend on what Mr. Turvey and Dr. Orr opine at trial. While Dr. Turvey does not specifically state in his report that one of the assailants could have accomplished the murders in a short time frame alleged by the state, he infers as much through his opinion that there was evidence of a cleanup efforts at the crime scene, which would have taken significantly longer period of time. Further, while Dr. Orr's report did not opine as to what the deficits of fine motor dexterity and visual motor function defendant suffers from, the extent she testifies to these deficits at trial, it may render Detective Gilbertson's opinions relevant to rebut any inference that the defendant could have had a single-handedly committed the crimes in less than 15 minutes. Okay, let me bring you back onto stage and toss it to you.
Voila, there's the craziness. Instead of a document, now you got to see me. Wow. and just real quick before we jump into it, I appreciate everybody that's in the chat. I'm sure people are maybe even saying things to me or messaging me. I cannot read the chat tonight, guys. I'm so appreciative of Swamp of handling this everything for me. I had more injections done in my eyes the other day, and Swamp is always checking in with me and trying to get me out of bed after the fact, but I cannot read, guys. I'm sorry, I can't read. So much love to all of you and a lot of respect. So in regards to that, I mean, these have been hot discussions now, Swamp, for a very long time. And then especially when Dylan Mortensen's various, and I think we need to use the word various because everything Dylan Mortensen that gets released about what she's saying or doing changes every other day. Even in the prosecution's documentation, it's ever evolving story. But you know, the fireman with the thought of a vacuum cleaner and this and that. I mean, I think we all potentially felt as though there was something wrong with this crime scene and the description that was being given surrounding that. And I think it's going to be really an amazing thing to watch the experts from both sides, the prosecution and the defense, attack this very thing within the courtroom at trial, because they're both going to have different perspectives of different thought processes of how this most likely happened. And in the common sense way of looking at this, we know a one person, action within this crime just seems so far-fetched and so difficult. But now with the lack of actual evidence within the home, which would be blood, it becomes even more apparent there's an issue with this crime scene. And that's why I did a video not long ago, Swamp, and I'm sure maybe you even remember, where I said Dylan Mortensen would have tracked blood from her bedroom down to Bethany Funk's bedroom just by exiting out her door and walking through that walkway of the living room and down the stairs, because even if it's just a perpetrator walking through there with a weapon or whatever it is, there's going to be blood there. There's going to be blood splatter. There's going to be just evidence galore. And we've heard nothing of that. And I think that's very concerning. And it's going to be cool to watch these experts explain to us why. And then what are they finding? Because we hear of a latent footprint coming out of Dylan Mortenson's bedroom, but that's all we've heard. But now I think it's starting to break the ice that a lot of the transparency that law enforcement, the courts want us to lead us to believe we're getting is not truly as transparent as it needs to be. So just a thought, just an opinion, but love to hear what you're thinking on that.
Well, yeah. So actually, before I give you my thoughts, you brought up something I hadn't really pondered, which is Dylan could have tracked, now that you bring up that video you had created, Dylan could have tracked blood going downstairs, and maybe that would have been something they cleaned up. But in that scenario, it's absolutely breathtaking that they wouldn't have called 911 for 8 hours. So it's I don't know. But one of the things that came out last night, and it was like additional reporting on the wounds, was Steve Gonzalez elaborated on what Kathy Mabbitt had said to him. And he said that two of the victims had blood that, and of course, it's a very sensitive subject, you guys, everybody, trigger warning, but so that two of the victims had, the blood had like pooled inside of them and it hadn't escaped. So he was saying that the crime scene was kind of contained within them. So I'm just throwing it out there, just trying to give all my thoughts on it that I've heard. The other thing that throws this off is like the part that they're really emphasizing is that the timeline is thrown off if the perpetrator was to add cleaning to the mix. Like the timeline can't be so with the cleanup. Now, I don't know if that means with any cleanup or the type of cleanup that they're seeing in this, but that the timeline seems to be what they're really trying to emphasize with this. But isn't it interesting that we hear about a cleanup now, and also DM mentions something shaped like a vacuum. I don't know if they're related or if the vacuum shape was just a reference to the shape, or if it actually was something like, I don't know, I'm just throwing out things that I've heard. The other thing that came out, we'll segue into the next topic with this statement, because if you haven't read this in the new paperwork, it's definitely, it's gonna further your clarity on what happened. Well, actually, one other thing you said, you mentioned the latent shoe print. That makes me wonder, because latent would mean that there was like a trail of footprints. So that means that the footprint in front of her door would have been, like a worn out footprint. So I wonder, could those have been cleaned up? Is it latent because the footprint was scrubbed? But I will give two new pieces of evidence. If you haven't heard yet, I don't know what to make of them. But apparently when Dylan went down the stairs, she saw Xana. And apparently that morning before they called 911, one of the things we were always wondering, well, somebody put a blanket on Xana. Okay. That's the first thing, is that somebody put a blanket on Xana. And like, I'm thinking to myself, did Dylan not just see her as she walked by? Did she think she needed a blanket? Or was that like the perpetrator covering her up to cover up the crime? I don't know. Like, does that have something to do with the cleaning? I'm just kind of giving a conscious stream of thought. But there's some interesting information about Hunter J. Apparently he saw Xana before they called 911, which explains a lot of like why everybody was freaking out on the phone when they called, when we were all like, well, why are you freaking out if you just think someone's passed out? Anyway, so I've said a few things there. I'll toss it to you. And while I toss it to you, I'm going to pull up this other piece of paperwork.
I mean, I kind of want to start with the concept, and I know what you're talking about, where Steve Gonsalves stated that the individuals died pretty much drowning within their own blood. And I I know many have been around some pretty scary crime scenes. I've been around one or two myself. Um, you, the blood doesn't just stay within you when you've been attacked with a weapon like this and you lose your life in a gruesome way. And the only way that blood would actually stay within you and pool is a slow bleed, which means you didn't have a devastating one shot, take your life type ordeal like so many people want to claim. Ethan, the only way a single perp could get the better of Ethan is through a single quick while you're dead asleep type attack. And I'm sorry to say that that doesn't fit what's being explained here. So something's a little bit off in regards to what's being explained. And the sad thing is I think there's an emotional discussion that transpired in that interview between Daniel and Steve. And I understand those two have built a bond. They feel comfortable talking together, but I also get that I think they both egg each other on a little bit to get more details out there and say more things. And I just don't 100% follow all of it as truth as of yet. That's just me. But when I did this video, I very clearly stated there's no possible way that Dylan Mortensen saw the perpetrator when she came out of her room and then proceeded at a later time to go down those stairs and did not see Xana somewhere. And I think you and I have talked about this as well, Kiki, where we've discussed that Xana maybe wasn't even in the bedroom. Now it's maybe making more sense that she was in the bedroom. She was just in view from the hallway in the door, which still gives you the 100% knowledge that Dylan Mortensen saw her before she proceeded downstairs to Bethany Funk's room, which raises even more questions. Why didn't you call 911? There's no excuse now at all for no 911 call. None. Because even if your best friend or your friend, your roommate, and you see them laying in their bedroom, just prone out on the floor, possibly intoxicated, passed out, they need help. I don't care what people say or think that frozen this, frozen shock, whatever. Your friend needed help, whether it be on a very minimal side of things or if they're actually losing their life. And to me, you have to know that their life is very much in danger because you just watched the perpetrator leave the home. And you heard crying in the bathroom, which that's a whole nother discussion, Kiki. Crying in the bathroom. There's something odd about that, isn't there? I mean, remember back in the day, people say they heard water running. They heard maybe someone taking a shower or washing up after the crime. Well, now we're talking cleanup, stuff happening in the bathroom, and no blood. Come on. I mean, let's put two and two together here and make common sense out of it.
Okay. Okay. Before I read this question out loud from Chickbait, and you guys, folks in the chat, if you have questions for AR, if you put a little asterisk next to them, I can see them quicker. But thank you for keeping the comments coming. I have to echo your sentiments, and this is the one place where I do get hung up talking about Dylan. Like, well, I mean, obviously I have so many questions, but in this one incident where I refrained so much from criticism, to me, like, it doesn't matter who the person is in my life. Like, if I see somebody laying on the floor in a medical distress, I mean, I go to them. Like, it doesn't matter who they are in life. It doesn't matter if they're your close friend or your roommate. They could be a total stranger on the street. Like, you never leave somebody in medical distress. The other part of that bothers me is when you hear the 911 caller talking about defibrillator, and we're talking about young people who are well aware of the epidemic in our country, where over 50,000 people have lost their lives to, Fetty poisoning. Like, it's shocking to me that you would see somebody passed out on the ground and not automatically think they might need Narcan or something. And it's just, I don't know. It bothers me, but it's not just that she was seen twice and somebody put a blanket on her. And she was, when you talk about her being in the hallway or being being like halfway in the door frame, her feet were facing the stairs. Her head was, let me just read you the thing. Have you read, I'm curious, you haven't been able to read this new document. You've been out.
But I did listen to somebody before we came on read it, that her head was facing her wall, her feet were facing the doorway out. So as if Dylan would have been seen, or she would see feet first and then, but I'm sorry. I mean, if you think your friend's been drinking and intoxicated and you see them in a position like that, it doesn't matter whether you see blood or anything of that nature. You need to get help, especially when there's alcohol involved, because you just don't know. That's not a position that you want someone you care about that could potentially have been drinking to fall in and you not do something about it. I mean, it's very sad.
And so Chickbait says, so there was a question. Okay, let me go get to the questions, and I'm going to stop talking because I'm privileged enough to have AR on my show. I don't want to make it. Let's get to some of these.
We definitely want you talking. We want you talking.
All right, so it started with Chickbait, and she said, ask AR, Swamp Rose Kiki, if he thinks no one saw anyone that night. I mean, I don't know what you.
I mean, that's a tough question. Because there's been so much non-transparency within everything being disclosed to us. And this is by far the worst I've ever seen when it comes to a case, that every turn, even when they seem to be releasing something that could be creditable, it just turns out to be false again. So it's like false narrative, false narrative, false narrative. Here's a little snippet that we're going to utilize as evidence. Oh, wait, no, we're going to contradict ourselves again. So when people ask me, do I feel like somebody saw, and what I'm assuming, do I feel like anybody saw the potential bodies of the victims prior to all of this coming down to the 911 call? I do. I absolutely do. And I think there was far more than seen. I think that there was actual devastation. Like, they saw, they knew what was going on, and then they potentially hesitated to call 911. There's just so much that goes into this. But at the end of the day, I'm not attacking anybody in this. I'm just being real about it. I'm just keeping it real that something is very wrong in the way people around this situation that survived acted. Something's very wrong in the manner this was investigated from moment one. And something's also very wrong with the release of false information that's really deterring people from getting to the very valid points that nothing transparent has been released about this case as of yet. I've heard a lot of these things, Kiki, that are being discussed. I've heard about Kaylee being punched in the face a long time ago. I know many people were talking about a beanbag and all these various things, the butt of a weapon. And I knew it was an actual description as a punch. I also had heard the rumor that there really wasn't much blood. But the way that these things were being discussed made it seem like there was something very wrong in the descriptions as to how these things were known, why they were known. And, the big thing now is that, what's being fed to me prior to me being off, as people have realized, I've been away for a little while here. We took a little break, Kiki, and people were reaching out to me, letting me know there's some booms coming, going to be released by the prosecution that just throws this case upside down. And with everything that I'm hearing, there's no booms. There's just not any booms. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
And
I
just want to follow up with what Chickbait says, because I think what she's saying is, what she's implying is that possibly, and okay, with all I said about, Narcan and talking about the defibrillator, and I was kind of sort of referencing the interaction between the 911 caller and the kids that morning. But what Chickbait is saying, once the noise settled, if you're in the house, when you explore the house, you were in AR. Oh, that wasn't the comment, but what I was going to say. Yeah. Anyway.
You have to. And I think you even stated it very well yourself, Kiki, in the fact you're in a home with people you supposedly care about, and something just doesn't seem right. And then you potentially see somebody that maybe it's just as simple as passed out, but you need to find out, especially if you hear these weird noises, weird times, crying. There's no doubt you go adventure through the house and figure out what's happening in your home. That's your comfort zone. That is your house. You don't just sit there and wonder. You don't just sit there and look at your job applications. You don't play on Snapchat. You don't add contacts to your phone. If you're scared enough to have to message your downstairs roommate and then run downstairs, you're going to damn well at least check out the floor that you're sleeping on to see what's going on, where you heard the noises. And then if need be, you scream and you run. You've got exits. I mean, Dylan Mortensen would know she had exits at her disposal if something was truly wrong and she wasn't going to be trapped. She could run down the stairs to Bethany's room and out the front door. She could run directly out the back door. She's not trapped. And a scream wakes up neighbors. So I don't know. I would explore the house. There's no doubt about
it. I actually, I don't know, like what was going through my head when you said that was the scenario that I did hear in the interview last night where so remember how they said Dylan said that she thought she saw one of the victims running up and down the stairs. Well, what if when Xana went out of her room, she saw the screen door open and said there's someone here and ran up the stairs and then came running back down. And that's when we heard, I'm here to help you. But yeah, I mean, I know, just running over different scenarios in my head. I had another question from you from Trisha, Echoes of Clarity, thank you so much, Trisha, for joining us on panel last night. It was an amazing show. Will you ask AR if he remembers the knocking and HJ saying, get out or go when he was on the phone to 911?
And this is where I'm baffled, Kiki, because for so long we had heard the doors were closed. They had to push a body along with the door out of the way to get into the door. So a lot of us were led to believe all the doors were closed and locked. A body was up against the door, and the only way to get in it was pretty much to force your way in. And that was seemingly backed when we hear the 911 call, which does sound like someone knocking on a door, announcing themselves before potentially entering that room. But now with what's being let out, none of that makes sense. None of that adds up. I can't answer it because I'm just as confused as so many. And that's why I say we transition from one little bit of evidence that everybody thinks is being released in a transparent manner. We start to follow that lead, to start thinking, okay, this is what happened. And then the very next document disproves that and opens up a whole nother can of worms. and none of them align with each other. Was the door open or was it not open? Did someone have to push it open to get there? Did they have to move Ethan out of the way to find Xana? Or was the door just wide open and Xana was in plain view and somebody possibly even put a blanket over the top and no blood and all? When Kathy Mabbott herself said this was the most gruesome, bloody crime scene that she potentially had ever seen. But now we're being led to believe there was no blood. This is why it's so hard, Kiki, and this is why sometimes behind the scenes you and I talk and I say, it's so hard to discuss this case because every time I begin a discussion about this case, it almost changes as if we're writing a fiction novel and we're getting these creative minds and just throwing these narratives out there. And it's like, I want to talk true crime and I want to do it in a respectful, professional, appropriate manner. But this case doesn't allow you to do that. There's no way to do it in this case. And yet victims' families are coming out frustrated by the so-called storytelling fairy tales that are being said. And all I could do is point back and say, talk to the judge, talk to the courts about why this is continuously a free changing case, because evidence doesn't change. It's either evidence or it's not. And when you do an investigation, you're supposed to gather evidence, utilize that in your investigation to prosecute somebody through the court of law in a factual, responsible manner. And that's not happening. That's absolutely not happening. And it's all backed by a judge that's willing to say, I want you, the prosecution, and you, the defense, to get together and create a narrative of what we're going to tell the jury happened that led us to Bryan Kohberger. That tells you this is a complete case that's okay with lying. It's okay with deception. It's okay with people like you or I that pay our taxes to never know the truth. But the 4 people that lost their lives are screaming for us all to know the truth. They want their truth in their lives meaning. And do you think we'll ever get that? I mean, I don't. I've been away for a couple of days, Kiki, and I come back a little more fired. You reeled a beast out of bed tonight that, you know, when we get into these conversations, and I've laid there talking to my wife as I've been trying to rest. I've been trying to avoid this case, and the very conversations I have are out of frustration. And no, I'm not the father that lost a child. I'm not anybody that's intertwined that should be as upset as I find myself being, but I'm upset because we can't get the truth. There's just nothing that's coming out that doesn't just smack someone in the face and believes it and says, hey, you're stupid for believing this. And we're going to call every expert that's dedicated their life to making a difference and worked hard to find truth in cases. We're going to call them conspiracy theorists. I mean, it's hard. It's difficult. And there's my rant and my rave, and I'm going to be quiet and allow Miss Swamp Rose, birthday girl, to take over the conversation.
Well, you got to toss it to me with the word conspiracy theory, don't you, AR?
I'm telling you, I'm going to raise one myself.
Yeah, so somebody over here knows how to push my buttons, but that's fine. Yeah. So, I mean, if it's going to go straight to, one of the things that's obviously been bothering me the most since the April 9th hearing, which is the statement that I found so prejudicial that I think everyone did, suggesting that Cy-Ray, who has an amazing character and a reputation that supersedes him, a reputation that people could seek their whole entire careers to have a portion of. Like it's an irreplaceable background. And he puts his career on the line in this affidavit. And when I heard the judge say the word conspiracy theory, it just feels like whether he was referencing his questions about sourcing from the FBI or he was talking about Ashley Jennings, whatever it is, that kind of statement reflects on the scope of whatever his testimony is going to be. So when I hear conspiracy theory, it really does fire me up, because there are things in here that, without having the entire picture, it confuses everything else. Last night we started talking about different types of injuries. So aside from two of the victims, so not having contain the blood within them, we also heard about multiple injuries. Okay. And we've talked a lot about multiple weapons possibly being used. And we just talked about crime scene cleanup that the defense is claiming could not have been possible along with the homicide in the period of time they're giving. So what I'm getting at is this goes back to multiple suspects. And I think that, it doesn't have to be mutually we should explore all of these options, no matter if you believe in Bryan Kohberger's guilt, innocence, or innocent until proven guilty, because when you hear something like that, when you hear in the third floor, there's an unknown male DNA on the knife sheath, one of the alleged murder weapons, this truly brings us to this point where it's like, doesn't this kind of indicate multiple perps? And where's the immediacy? First off, there was no immediacy to find the identity of that DNA at the beginning, when it should have been the most crucial thing, and so now I don't know. We're to the multiple perp theory. And a couple things to point out about multiple perp theory with that Elantra. They were originally looking for Elantra with multiple suspects in it. And they, in the interview last night, the Elantra was touched base on. And in fact, the police had seen footage of that suspect vehicle, white car. They didn't say Elantra from day one. And that was info they knew from day one. And they didn't release that into the public until a certain point. I just keep thinking to myself, where was the immediacy? And I'll end it with what we heard Payne saying on the stand, where he said, I just figured if we needed to, we'd upload that other DNA in the future. And what would it have been that would have triggered him to upload that? What more do you need? I don't know. I'll toss it to you with that. And then I'll bring up the paperwork afterwards, and we can read a little bit about what was new from the transcripts that was released yesterday.
I scratched my head over the entirety of this case. It's a disgrace that, I don't know. I guess there's people that maybe just believe this entire narrative that's being fed, and they don't realize the twists and the turns of the stories. And one thing that, I've learned through the years of living my life, but also what many other very intelligent people always said to me, once you begin telling a lie, it can tend to spin out of control, because one, you don't always remember the lie that you were telling to start with, but then it creates more lies on top of that lie to be able to continue the path of trying to make the claim either you didn't do something or whatever it might be. And unfortunately, I feel like right now it just continues to pile on in this investigation. They were full of it from the beginning. They were trying to cover up the very poor manner this case was being investigated, the back doors and all the craziness within it. And now we're sitting just a handful of months away from a trial, and the lies are just continuing to pile. In the sense, I'm telling you, Kiki, this is almost like a challenge to you and I. If we sat down and just took Dylan Mortensen's statements that have been released from the beginning, from when she was just a roommate that was asleep through the entire of the night, didn't know anything was even happening, to the frozen shock face, and all the way through until where we're at today, watch how everything just piles on discrepancy after discrepancy after discrepancy. And here's the problem. We're still not at the truth. We're still not there. And what could potentially be let out of the bag next? Now we're talking about experts are going to come in and say, not only is there multi-perps, but there's multi-weapons, which many of us have claimed. But now they're even trying to make it seem like this was not a bloody crime scene. And that's to cover up for Dylan Mortensen. I'm telling you, that's to cover for Dylan Mortensen. They were tearing out the floors, the floorboards, the drywall of this home to the point it was gutted. And they want to claim there's no blood in this house. That doesn't make sense. And then what are you going to tell me? Because just to finish this off before you move on, but you brought up the fact that 2 of these victims unfortunately lost their lives by potentially drowning within their own blood, meaning that the crime scene was within themselves. And then 2 others were probably not as pretty. Are you going to tell me Ethan and Xana on the 2nd floor were the only 2 where the crime scene was contained within them? Because doesn't that just seem a little bit protective of Dylan, that it just so happens that on the very floor where the eyewitness was is the only non-messy floor? That's not common sense. It's not common sense.
As you're saying that, like, and I'm just thinking of the Jen Joe quote, which was the biohazard company that did the cleanup, specifically the 2nd floor, because I've made about 10 videos on this, specifically the 2nd floor. And, this was the quote from the owner of the company: "The worst biohazard job they've ever cleaned up, mind you, where the techs could not sleep for 3 days." The quote from the owner was, "Xana and Ethan fought for their fucking lives." That was the quote in Facebook. That was in writing. So I'm just thinking of that when I hear it. And I do want to echo what AZ is saying, because I have said this privately. I want to have integrity and say the same things I say in private as I do in public. AZ says, "I'm wondering, oh wait, that wasn't the one. I'm sorry. If BK deserves the benefit of the doubt, DM certainly should too as well." The only thing is that when I say BK deserves the benefit, I'm specifically speaking to innocent and proven guilt until proven guilty, and DM isn't on trial. But I just want to say one thing, like, I do in some way, I definitely want to, I only can speak for myself, but like, I feel like when I was Dylan's age, I probably wouldn't have reacted right in this situation. Specifically, like, I would have been blissfully, I would never, ever, I don't know. But I'm bringing up the paperwork because I was trying to see exactly what they said because of what Chickbait was saying about Dylan seeing the body prior to calling 911. And the quote in this says, "DM saw Xana again for a split second." So that was in the morning. Hold on a second. I think we should just bring up the paperwork. I don't know.
And if I can respond while you're doing that, I just want to respond to AZ. And I absolutely respect the statement. And I want people to understand something very, very seriously about where I stand in this case. I'm right down the middle of this case. I'm not saying anybody's innocent. I'm not saying anybody's guilty. I don't know all the details. I don't know everything. I personally, if proof comes out that Bryan Kohberger committed this crime, then I'm going to damn well step up to the plate, and I'm going to discuss the fact that he's a sick person that committed a horrendously bad crime, and I'll have no problem doing that. I'm not protective of anybody's egos, and the thing is, I'm not here to attack Dylan Mortensen. I don't know how I would react in a situation that transpired in that house. If I had heard the things that she potentially heard, and I had heard the fighting and everything that transpired, I can't tell you I would get involved either, because you know, even in the penitentiary, I heard things happen the cell over or in my cell even that I didn't get myself involved in because it wasn't my business. And I can't tell you that if I lived in the 1122 King Road home and this tragedy happened, and I happened to be in the same bedroom that Dylan Wordson lived in, that I would have even opened my door to have looked. I don't know whether I would have or not. If I had been drinking, most likely not. I bet I would have just gone to sleep. Unless somebody screamed help or they needed help or some of that, that makes a different situation. But I'm telling you what, if I heard a boyfriend and a girlfriend getting into it and they're arguing, that's not my issue until someone says they need help. That's not my place. So I'm easy. I completely understand what you're saying, but don't think that I'm giving Bryan Kohberger the benefit of the doubt and I'm not giving Dylan Wordson the benefit of the doubt, because I don't know truth. And that's what I'm talking about here. And I think, Kiki, you understand that too. My main rant here is what's being presented to us through our justice system, through our law enforcement investigation, and through back and forth with the defense and the prosecution has not been transparent. I'm not blaming that on any of the victims. I'm not blaming that on the roommates. I'm not blaming that on any parents of anybody. I'm blaming that directly on the justice system. It's a shitty gag order. It's a potentially bad investigation. And then the way that it's being released isn't forthcoming enough that even Steve Gonzalez says it's wrong. That's a victim's family member stating clearly he feels as though the way the information is coming out is wrong. It goes to show you transparency is lacking, and we all know it. And we should speak up on that because it is our justice system, the one that we elect officials for, the one that our taxpayers' dollars fund, the one that is supposed to keep our communities safe and our children, like the 4 that just lost their lives in this tragedy and others that are losing their lives every single day. This justice system is not only supposed to protect them, but it's also supposed to find justice when they lose their life. And this one right now that we're all watching is sickening. And everybody should be upset. Whether you find someone guilty or innocent, you should damn well be upset at everything you're seeing happen. And that's not accusing anybody of anything.
Absolutely not. And there's a totally, and it's just bringing up an interesting conversation because there's a totally different thing between giving a regular citizen or somebody on social media or even a victim, survivor, the benefit of the doubt and upholding somebody's constitutional rights that if we don't cherish, even if somebody is a monster, our constitutional rights need to be upheld, and innocent until proven guilty is a legal term. And it's kind of a responsibility we have as citizens because we have no legal obligation as not being officers of the court or witnesses in the case or sworn in jury members. We don't have an obligation for innocent until proven guilty. But when the jury is chosen from a cross section of your peers, you better believe that if you don't have that attitude, then the cross section being chosen is tainted. And just to like bring the conversation in full circle, you know, I said that piece about Dylan, but Jeff, and just to, you know, kind of give the playing devil's advocate on my own self, with Jeff saying, I don't know if you would call 911 over the sounds of some, oh, that wasn't the one. Hold on. Jeff's other one, basically saying it's a party house. So you'd be used to people pass out drunk. Well, I'm still not going back on my initial statement, which is, I don't know about someone passed out in a hallway being okay. Like, even if it's a party house and somebody's passed out drunk in the hall, like, I think that's medical distress to me. It just, you know, and I don't think that's adult opinion, but yes, like everything else I say, I stand by, but in that one incident is particularly if there was a blanket placed over her. And if it wasn't one of the survivors that put the blanket on her, I mean, that brings us back to this whole time frame thing with the cleanup and the blanket and everything, like how the crime could have been committed in that period of time. And I know you guys have more questions for AR. I did star some things. Get to them. Here, let me pull up a question for you, AR, here. Wait, oh, thank you, Ashley, for the super chat. Ashley Sears, she says, I'm late, but did y'all hear the SG threatened true crime creators? I didn't hear that.
I did. I saw the Kohbergers, yeah.
Well,
the funny thing is, let me just respond to that for 1 second, because Steve G and I have had our back and forth in the past. We've given each other the respects. We've gone back and forth in a what I would say is a raised voice type of discussion before as well. Him and I sat 10 to 15 feet from each other within the courtroom, and there was zero issue. There was no disrespect from his side. I didn't offer any disrespect from my side. There was no discussion. There was no evil looks. There was nothing that was out of the ordinary of just everybody sitting within a courtroom. And him and I, we were in very close proximity a couple of times. I mean, obviously we weren't holding hands, but, we bumped into each other on the way in and out of the restroom. And, there was not any issues. I feel as though in the discussion that he had, and I heard bits and pieces of it because, of course, people had to get it to my attention. But that interview he did, even if I don't agree with it, it's not my place to whether I agree with it or not. He chose to do it. That's up to him. That's his choice. And for Daniel to do that, that's up to those two to work that out. That has nothing to do with me. Do I agree with it? Probably not, but it's not my place. But I could understand the emotional roller coaster that would have to put somebody on. You're talking live for people to hear about your daughter and the investigation and the crime that took her life. And I can see the frustration. And I still, to this day, within me, I still feel like he's not 100% satisfied with the investigation or the process that's taking place. And I get that it's frustrating that we feel as though he's taken it into his own hands. But I'm telling you, hey, Kiki, we've had this discussion. I've had this discussion with Unfiltered Lucky and Pete with Murder Metal Mayhem. If I was the father sitting in that courtroom and somebody had taken my daughter or my wife's life, there would be no barrier between me and the accused that could hold me back. None. And that man sits respectfully trying to allow the court to do what it's supposed to do. And like I said, I was feet away from the guy, and I watched his wife cry. And I watched him try to console his wife. And I watched all of that. And I'm not standing up for anybody or saying I love anybody because of, the emotions that they showed or anything of that nature. But, I think some words came out of his mouth in that interview that came out of frustration and most likely out of emotional chaos. And I can't say I wouldn't have spoken the same way or worse, because I get on my rants and my raves too, where things fly out of my mouth. And I do know, Tizzle Stick, I know he was speaking directly to certain people. I know he was.
Yep. And just for the audience at home, who's what, Twizzle Stick was with AR in the courtroom when he's saying he was alone with them. And I really appreciate you guys Daniel reaches a certain audience and our viewers. I'm glad it's reaching our viewers, your interpretation of what happened. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm just going to say that was one of the most raw interviews I've ever seen. And I think that that's because I'm close to the case. I think it's because I know the person who is doing the interviewing. I think it's because I know you and you talk about Steve Gonzalez in your interactions with him. But yeah, it was hard to watch, and you could hear the emotions, and like you could tell the times where things were getting intense. And I know I do this all the time. I live stream all the time, and I have moments where I can't, I just like can't believe I just said that. And I just can't imagine,
Most of the time, that's every other word for me. Did I really just say that? But I mean, do I agree with everything that Steve Gonzalez says? No. Are Steve Gonzalez and I friends? No. Um, do I have any type of bond with the man? No, I don't. Have I communicated with him? Yes, I have. And I take what he's told me as a grain of salt, but I can feel the passion that he has for his daughter. And I do have some sympathy within me for people that have lost. It's not an easy thing to go through. And no, I haven't, been through the same circumstances, but that doesn't mean that, I'm not going to feel for the man. Now, if I were in a position as a creator, because I can't put myself in Steve's position, but if I put myself as a creator, a YouTube creator, and that's what we are, Kiki. We are YouTube creators. We're out here before an audience. We share our thoughts. We talk our opinions. We discuss case facts. We do many different things. But that's an interview that I probably would have avoided at this time. I just think it's the wrong time for it, considering we are walking up on pretrial. We're walking up on jury selection. We're walking up on trial itself. And I would have, as a content creator, I think I would have taken a step back and just allowed the process through the judicial system to work its way through what's happening, rather than trying to put more stress or more pressure upon that. And there's no reason. And I think Kiki and I have we've dedicated ourselves. We don't talk about other creators in a negative way. We don't present any, deterring statements towards people, whether we agree with them or not. We keep it very professional over here. And I'm going to stick to that. And I know Kiki's dedicated in the same manner with me. We don't want the drama. We don't want the hate. We don't want the negativity. So I'm not specifically saying anybody did anything wrong, because it is their show. We just have to really hold ourselves accountable as content creators. We have to be very careful in what we do ourselves. We can only control us. And you're right. I think if somebody had attacked somebody or threatened somebody on my show, I would have taken it down. I would have edited it out. I would have muted it. I would have done something to that portion of the interview, or I just would not have put the interview up. They had plenty of time. That was not live. That interview was not live. So I get what people are saying. It's wrong to threaten people. It is. It's very, very wrong. And that could have been edited out. I think that could have done a little bit better, but who am I to talk about somebody else's show? So.
Gosh, you know what? It's so interesting. You guys, that's what I love about the live chat and having a panel, is you guys are like having a think tank. So what I was going to say is the only grievance that I was really seeing from, other than, speaking of things that aren't like, official record, or just, it was the claim that this could taint the jury pool. But there's another, thing that I didn't think of, which was the interview was edited. And, I know that through trial and error, like I like the position that we're taking now. And it's the most respectful way to like not ever speak any negativity about the creators amongst us. So I'm certainly not critiquing right now too, but in retrospect, looking back, This is what we're always pointing out about mainstream media. And I'm not trying to compare Daniel to Nancy Grace, but I mean, this is what I was saying about when Nancy Grace was interviewing the Gonzalez family, like the emotional stories, knowing that, you know, knowing you're invoking an emotional response. You know, I'm what I'm saying is the sensationalism. We always recognize it, and in retrospect, looking back at the things that can really provoke things, it's a learning lesson. I would have edited that out too now.
And Kiki, you and I talk about it all the time behind the scenes. We are focused at being the best versions of ourselves. We work each and every day to improve our delivery, our show, and we hold ourselves accountable to the work and the things that we do, because we are literally all we can control is ourselves. And if we could set a standard to where, you know, we walk a certain path ourselves, maybe others can learn, just like you and I have. We've done a lot of learning. I know I can speak for myself. I've learned a lot from the beginning of my time, not even on the platform, but even before that, mingling on Facebook and the crap I got myself into on that. And then I came to the platform and I had to learn lessons each and every day through what I do here. And now, even at this very point, this very day, each day I focus on getting better. I focus on improving, because I want to do this. And it's funny because Unfiltered Lucky and Kiki and I, we all talk about this. We're not here just for the IDAHO4 case. We want to do this into the future, meaning that we could do this for a while. And it's not about the money. It's because we love to do this. We like to talk true crime. We like to have the community conversations. We like doing this. And if we do this in an appropriate manner, we'll be around and we'll learn each and every single day. And then, you know, we'll just improve and keep moving forward. And that's really all I can say. And you're right, Kiki. There is the capability to edit when you do videos. I know live streams are more difficult, but you can still even edit the live stream. It gives you the option. The minute you're done with that live stream, you can edit it. I think that could have been something that might have been a little more appropriate to leave out of that interview last night, because outside of that, I think that it was an important interview for Steve to get his emotions and his feelings out there. I just wish that some of that had been left out.
Yeah. Well, I think I was saying this to one of my mods after the interview. I think that the reason why everybody is so upset, particularly with like the tainting of the jury pool, is because it is so incredibly moving when you hear the victim's father speak. I mean, you can't help but be, you know, moved by that. And like I said, with everything I just said and the critiques we were just giving, that was one of the most real and raw interviews I've ever seen in my life. And it's probably because my personal connection, you know, following the case for so long, like your connections with the person he was interviewing and like knowing the interviewer. But yeah. Anyway, let me get to some of these questions in here. Gosh, in AR, I should stop. You know, before I go, I want to check in with you. We had said we were going to do an hour. We're a little past the hour mark, and I know I dragged you basically out of bed for this live stream. How are you feeling? Are you feeling? I wanted to check in with you.
I could probably do probably 20, 30 more minutes, and then I'm going to call it done at about the 30-minute mark if we can keep it within that.
I absolutely will, you guys. So I'm setting a timer, and so the audience is aware we'll be wrapping up in about 30 minutes. And we just really appreciate, we know you could be anywhere tonight. We know there's a lot of people live stream. So thank you so much for welcoming us into your living rooms and your offices right now. So a couple of these starred questions here. Trisha says, and this was a huge point people were bringing up last night. It sounded like Hitler was saying or what DM testified to the grand jury. If that's the case, the 911 call contradicts itself.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Each and every day, the transparency gets less and less in this case. But unfortunately, Hitler just thinks that Dylan Mortensen's the most credible witness, and he's willing to fly with what's being said. And I'll tell you what, this case is all about the appeals process, ladies and gentlemen. I hate to say that. Like, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I've been down this track and I've watched these cases before. To be an interesting trial, but I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed with the end result. I think that it's going to be an appeal watch for sure.
And you know, and just going back to the conspiracy theory thing, I'm actually surprised that we're not seeing it addressed in somewhere. I don't know. I just feel like that could be like a future litigation thing. Like, anyway. Next statement, and I thought this was kind of interesting. Jeff says, but if Dylan saw Xana passed out on the floor, I think Dylan might have assumed that Ethan that covered her with the blanket so she doesn't get cold. Now, I will say this. If somebody did, if the unaliver had the foresight to not only do the cleanup, but to put a blanket on Dylan, that would make it look like she was passed out, sleeping on the floor. And I take back what I say. I mean, it doesn't look like someone's in medical distress if they've been tucked in a blanket. That's like so diabolical, but you're right. I guess I didn't really put it into that context. Going on to say, in other words, maybe Dylan felt she didn't need to get involved with whatever was up with Xana. And yeah, it could have been thought of as possibly arguing, except we know that that's not likely what it sounded like. And I start another comment, which this one right here by, and I'll toss it to you after this. What do you think, 13, who said, no matter what, why was nobody smelling the 4 unalived victims? And this goes back to what we heard from Evil CJ and his personal experience, not only with blood, and again, trigger warning, this is all really, you know, we're talking about the injuries now, but with that type of stabbing, when you puncture an organ, there's another type of noxious smell that enters the situation that's very difficult to ignore. I don't know if being on the first floor that changes anything about the smell, but I'm going to toss it to you and hear what you have to say.
You know, it's going to be really hard to even try to make any educated discussional guess on any of this stuff until we get to trial and we kind of learn more about the crime scene itself. But the sad thing about it is the transparency is not going to become better when we get to trial. It's going to become worse. These types of things are going to be sealed and closed. So the people that are going to be expecting to learn more about the injuries or the body play, these are not things that are going to be public. They're going to be done in the dark. Dylan Mortensen's testimony will be done in the dark, which I mean, I guess protects people. But, you know, at the end of the day, yeah, I could understand if Dylan Mortensen in her mind thought that Ethan potentially had covered Xana up. Maybe Xana fell on the floor asleep and Ethan was the gentleman and put a blanket. I think Ethan would have just picked her up and put her in the bed. I mean, he's a pretty big boy. But my whole question is, if you can clearly see Dylan being able to clearly see Xana, even if she's under a blanket or whatever it might be, how is there just no thought process to see about Ethan? Like, none. There's potentially a wide open door to the room that you can see Xana clearly on the floor. Why don't you just go to the doorway and say, hey, Ethan, is everything okay in here? Like, is Xana okay? And I'm not saying that's what I would have done because I don't know, but that kind of makes more sense than, I don't know, because I mean, bodily fluids and things start to smell pretty bad pretty quick. And why did Hunter, the minute he came up, you know, before the 911 call? Why did he have to go get a knife from the kitchen? What was the knife for if there was really no thought of a threat?
Whew. You know, you just brought up something I didn't even think of, which is with that type of noise. My gosh, I don't know why this didn't occur to me before, but with that type of noise, the loud thud, the dog barking, it's okay, I'm here to help you, the crying, particularly the crying, that sounds like a DV situation, right? And yes, aside from the medical distress, which obviously we've come up with a plausible explanation for in the live chat, but aside from the medical distress, if you think your friend might have been involved in a DV situation, you're right. Popping your head in, hey, Ethan, is everything okay in here?
Well, I mean, even more so,
Right.
I mean, was there no knowledge or conversation that Ethan and Xana potentially had an issue that had taken place at the frat house? I mean, Bethany would have known that, to where there was an argument, maybe a little bit of a skirmish, some situation happened over at the frat house, and now you hear a lot of stuff happening within your room, including, crying and different murmurs and different things, and then you come out of your room and you watch somebody dressed in all black with some sort of face covering walk out your back door, and you see Xana laying on the floor, which to me, if you see Xana laying on the floor and you can describe head towards the wall, feet towards the door, she's not under a blanket because she's visible enough to you to be able to describe her feet was towards you and her head was towards the wall. If she's under a blanket, you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't want to go check that everybody was okay. I mean, and again, and I want people to really understand that Kiki and I both have made the very clear statement. We don't know what our reaction would have been. We don't know what we would have done in this situation. We can talk based out on points of what we think could happen, what should happen, but that doesn't mean that's what would happen. And I just know if I felt like a domestic violence was transpiring, which if there's a scuffle and I know there's a man and a woman in a room and they've been drinking, that's the number one prime time for a domestic issue. That's typically when domestic issues arise, is while there's some drinking and things happening. And I think, yeah, as a male, I would have gone to check that out, but I'm not sure I would expect a female to do that.
That's true. That's another good point. And that's why it's more of a conscious stream of thought than sitting here making, statements. I do want to just remind the chat something really quickly. Could we please, and apologies if anyone's name was mentioned, could we just please be careful about mentioning other creators' names in the chat? Just as a rule, we try to use initials. We don't want to mess with any other creator's brand or their name in our chat. As we wouldn't want them to do to us either. So I've tried to race a couple, but the chat's moving too fast, and so I'm just throwing it out there. If you could just please, and also, that goes for the victims' names. Maybe we could use initials in the chat, but yeah, I lost my train of thought. Oh, I also wanted to say a couple things. First off, thank you so much for the gifted memberships, Jeremy Pearson. We really appreciate the support. Like, it really helps keep our channels going. And on the same note, I wanted to say thank you so much to Phil the Gilbertian Biggs. And Phil has a question. AR, angels don't have birthdays. They are okay, well, I guess it's more of a statement. They are perpetual spirits, unbound by time and fate. We are blessed to have her amongst us, be an example. Thank you so much. I appreciate your kind words. I am so grateful to spend my birthday with my YouTube friends and family. I love you guys, and I had an amazing day. I want to apologize to my mods. I didn't give anybody a heads up on this live stream because I was playing around all day long. And so I appreciate you showing up here last minute, and thank you to all of your support. So anyway, thank you, Phil. All right, so I should bring this up. I'm going to be honest. I don't know exactly where the quote about the blanket is. And Bunny says, Xana being covered by a blanket is not fact, is it? I don't know. And oh, I'm sorry, AR, you go on.
I was going to say, I don't think we know any facts about this case as of yet. I mean, I hate to put it that way, but I've been up here for this live, and I think my biggest rant, Kiki, as you've probably noticed, has been the lack of transparency. I don't think we know many truths as of yet. Hopefully one day this stuff starts coming out and makes more sense and it adds up, and there's more logic and more common sense and more truths. But at this point, all I'm seeing is a judge that said we're going to stop sealing and redacting things, and everything's sealed and redacted. And I don't know.
Just going back to, I think we don't need to go back to the Steve G thing. I think we all understand what he was saying. Swamp Rose, don't forget to tell AR, thank you for trying to help me learn StreamYard. I'm still learning, LOL. That's from Chickbait.
Never get overwhelmed. We're still learning on a daily basis as well. So anytime we can help, don't ever hesitate to reach out. I know Kiki's a big helper as well, and she's probably a little better at it than me, but anytime I can help, please reach out, and I'll do all I can.
You always do, and that's the truth, and we're grateful for everything. You're like a philanthropist to our YouTube community, and we appreciate you.
But and don't feel bad, Chickbait, because literally we've been working with Unfiltered Lucky to get his StreamYard set up and his lives, and he was able to do his first few members only lives not too long ago, and literally I think Jen and I were on the phone with him for hours upon hours through numerous days trying to get that to work. And so don't feel bad. We all go through it.
And now we have Lucky, thanks to you and Jen, live streaming in our community, and we're really grateful for that. Thank you. This statement is just like, I don't know, I need to let it sit and research on it. So it says, a loud thud and dog barking is out. AT said in a filing, there's no audio. What the AF? I mean, AR, I know how many times you told me that the probable cause affidavit was a story, but I mean, do I need to pull up for those who haven't followed the case or don't know what we're talking about? The probable cause affidavit has a long paragraph at 417 regarding a ring cam that went off 50 feet from Xana's window, and it heard whimpering. It heard a loud thud, and it heard dog barking, which kind of brought the dog noises for a total of 15 minutes. But if AT's saying no audio, what was that in the PCA?
Well, there's a couple of ways that I'll describe the PCA and what people should do with it. There's two very important things. You could either take the respectful way and you just crumble it up into a big wad of paper and throw it in your garbage can or your fireplace, lighting it on fire to keep your warm, house because it's garbage. Or two, I mean, you can crumble it up and use it as toilet paper because it's just full of it anyway. That probable cause, ladies and gentlemen, it's the biggest disgrace most likely ever in a true crime case because it got a young man arrested in Bryan Kohberger with no factual basis to the PCA. And I get that PCAs, and I think I've told so many people, they're theory-based documents, but at this point, none of the theories are true.
Okay. Got the starred comments back here. Oh my gosh.
Did we get to your second talking point, Kiki? I don't want to cut cut you short on your talking points here, but
All right, well, we got 10 minutes. Let's just do that. I'll just bring up the paperwork and I'll read you. It's literally 4 pages, but it's 4 condensed pages. So let me bring this up. I don't really need to ask you questions. You're going to have them once I read this to you. Whoops, that's the wrong one. But this document that I just showed you is fire. It's just, we'd be live streaming for 3 hours if we decided to do that.
I mean, is it better to save it, just do a show on it tomorrow night? Just attack that document heart and soul tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I would love to do it tomorrow night, or even if you wanted to do it's Saturday, you know, if you wanted to do some sort of daytime live stream too, I'd love to. I want to actually, no, I'm going to bring up, I want to read you one of these. I'm going to read you page 4. That's, yeah, let's get to page 4 on this.
I'm just saying we can attack it more. We can start it tonight, but we could really go in depth with it.
There's so much out of this. I guarantee. Yes, I do. I do want to do that for our theme of our, what the hell? Hold on. Oh, here we go. Oh, whoops. This is the wrong document. I'm sorry, you guys.
And guys, just so everybody knows, this is new to me. Like, I've not been involved in these documents. I haven't been around the YouTube world. So what Kiki's presenting and my reaction to it's going to be first time. Like, I don't know what she's bringing up. So.
Okay, so this one is called Order on State's Motion in Limine regarding text messages and 911 call. All right. Order on State's. There we go. All right, and let's move to page 4. Actually, no, let's go to page 3. All right, here we go. At approximately 4 a.m. Actually, let's go back up. This is okay. We're gonna start halfway through page 2. After spending the evening out, roommates DM and BF Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogan returned to their homes at 1122 King Road in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. At approximately 2 a.m., they met in Kaylee's bedroom to talk for a while before going to bed. A 5th roommate, Xana Kernodle, was out with her boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, and was not home yet. So, I mean, there's 2 things with this timeline that just in that one sentence. The first one is just they're up in Kaylee's room and they start talking about going, well, actually, let me finish this. The roommates debate on going out to the food truck for a late snack, prompting DM to send a text at 2:10 a.m. to the Uber driver she knew to see if he was driving. So that explains why we saw EG, text, Exhibit D1. Ultimately, however, the girl decided to just go to bed. So a couple interesting things about this. Before in the timeline, if I'm not mistaken, at this point, we had thought that Xana and Ethan were home, right?
Well, we know Jeff Kernoodle had spoken with her on the phone, and evidently they had ordered pizza and were sitting on the couch, and he was even concerned about something that had transpired prior to that, to the point that he was going to potentially go to the house to be with his daughter, but she told him everything was going to be fine. The other daughter said, hey, you've been drinking, you're not going to go over there. But also at that point, we were told that Xana had let her dad know that they were going to be in for the night.
There's a couple of statements people said when same thing. I thought Xana's dad said they were home by midnight when they talked to her. A lot of us thought, okay, well, she could have been making an excuse for her dad. Tonka says the time frame between 2 a.m. and 3:51 is crucial. And then Sweet and Salty is touching base on something I wanted to bring up. Grub truck closes at 2:30. They'd never make it in time. Another interesting thing we heard last night, and I'm not done with the document, but I just wanted to pull full front and center for this one, is we heard an interesting statement about the grub truck from Steve Gonzalez last night, suggesting that it might not be from that night. I am baffled by that statement, AR. Yes, I haven't studied the grub truck as much as other people, but I have studied the grub truck. And one of the things we studied were the outfits that matched the Corner Club outfits, particularly Xana's outfit and well, I mean, we debated Hoodie Guy's outfit for so long. We saw what he was wearing. I find it so odd if that weren't from that night. And then, so anyway, I'll toss it.
Unfortunately, and I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful in any way, but things that have been said by Steve Gonzalez at times of emotional roller coaster times have been incorrect. And I want to say, in my opinion, there's no doubt that grub truck video was from that night. There's no argument within that was that night. Jackass walked them from the corner club to the grub truck. They got their food. They got their private driver home. Jackass left directly to go to wherever he left to go to. There's no argument that that's the proper night. And I think that was a slip of tongue. And that's why it's so important to be so careful with these interviews, especially when they're conducted on a YouTube spectrum like this, that's literally dissecting everything about this case. And to fuel something like that, it's just a mistake that could potentially turn bad. And I just at the end of the day, I think it's a bad statement. It's incorrect. He knows today it's incorrect, and he probably wishes he hadn't said it. Maybe, I don't know. But it's just like he's the one that made the statement that Bryan Kohberger connected to the girl's home Wi-Fi. We know that's not true.
Yeah, and last night he did. I liked the way that he redacted that statement. He said how he came to that conclusion and that he was mistaken about that. And I appreciate the way he redacted that, because he actually explained to us how he made the mistake, which you don't get a lot. You just get, oh, I messed up. But he actually explained why he thought that's what it said, because it was such a big, it was such a big clue, it sounded like, and such a big statement that if it were true, I mean, so I'm glad that he redacted the way he was. On the same note, he said that Sigma Chi, he has heard that was a rumor too. So that brings us back to a couple other things. Giovanni said, which I forgot, which is the PCA states that BF and Xana and E returned to the house at 1:45. Again, something else we hear from the PCA, along with the audio, the thud, the crying, the dog barking at 4:17, that apparently no audio. No Xana and Ethan home at 2 a.m. So many questions. I don't know. So didn't the PCA say that DM said that all the occupants of the house were in all 3 rooms by 4 a.m.? I don't think I contradicted that one. Let me bring the document back up, and we'll read a little bit more. And I promised AR we were doing 30 more minutes, so we only got less than 5 to go. Let's get down here. At approximately 4 a.m., DM heard strange noises and crying coming from the bathroom. She opened her door at one point and saw a man dressed in black with a ski mask and walking by her bedroom door. She then placed calls and texts to her other roommates to see if they were awake. Only BF, who resided on the ground floor, answered and spoke once for 24 seconds, during which DM told BF she thought she heard something. They spoke again. A minute later for 41 seconds, and DM told BF she saw a man in a ski mask leaving the house. They exchanged the following message between 4:22 and 4:26. And I actually, for time's sake, I am going to skip over that, and I'm going to come down here. To where it talks about, because this is, kind of, we touched on this at the beginning, and this is what I'd like to end with. So at approximately, well, let's go back up here. Oh gosh, no, we'll go over all that. We'll just get to Hunter, because like you said, we'll go over this tomorrow. At approximately 11:50, DM called her friend EA and asked her to come over and check the house because she was scared. EA and her boyfriend HJ came over. Exhibit D1 grand jury transcript, blah, blah, blah. They met DM and BF at the bottom floor of the house. Grand jury transcript, blah, blah, blah. Together, DM and BF and Hunter started to walk up the stairs to the second floor. When they reached the second floor, Hunter J went to the kitchen and grabbed a kitchen knife. When he walked back out, DM saw Xana again for a split second. And I just started bawling. I thought she had just like, I don't even know. I thought maybe she was still drunk and all asleep on the floor. Grand jury testimony, blah, blah, blah. BF also saw Xana lying on the floor. Hunter J told DM and BF to get out. EA, who had started up the stairs, also turned around after Hunter J instructed her not to come up any further. They both went outside. Shortly afterwards, Hunter J exited the house and told them to call 911. He was pale white and mentioned something about someone being unconscious. At 11:56, BF called 911 from her cell phone and spoke to CC on the 911 dispatcher. The call lasted for 4 minutes, 11 seconds. During the call, the phone was passed around to several different individuals, including BF, DM, and HJ, and an unidentified female speaker. Heaving, heavy breathing, and crying can be heard throughout the call. BF spoke first, stating, "Something is happening. Something's happening in our house, and I don't know what," states Exhibit S3, 911 call audio. BF attempted to provide an address for the house to dispatch, but could not continue. At one point, an unidentified female speaker took the phone and provided the address and BF's phone. The following exchange ensued. 911 operator, "Okay, tell me exactly what's going on." Female, one of our roommates passed out and was drunk last night and she's not waking up." 911 operator, "Okay." Female, "Oh, and they saw a man in their house last night." "Yeah." 911 operator, "And you are with the patient?" "Hi, this is DM." "Okay, I need someone to keep the phone. Stop passing it around." DM, "Can I just tell you what happened pretty much?" 911 operator, "What's going on currently? Is someone passed out right now?" DM, "I don't really know, but pretty much at 4 a.m. 911 operator, "Okay, I need to know what's going on right now. If someone is passed out, can you find out?" DM, "Yeah, I'll come. Come on, B. We got to go check. We have to go. She's passed out. She's passed out. What's wrong? She's not waking up." Hunter J, Xana. I mean, and we learned more about this 911 call in that one exchange than we have in 3 months, or 6 weeks, I should say. Any thoughts, AR? We have 48 new comments since I started reading, so I'm assuming you have some thoughts.
I just don't even know what to make of the 911 call, or I mean, we've discussed it, and I really haven't changed my view on it. I think it's a tough thing. I mean, 911 calls can be tough, but there's just something really odd about this. Like, I still don't see how they think someone's just passed out, but they're freaked out. Someone grabs a knife. It doesn't make sense. But in all of that, I mean, I come to the conclusion in my mind, and this is just my thoughts, there's no blanket over the top of Xana. Yeah. That's just my gut feeling. No blanket. No blanket.
So we have given you no answers tonight, but hopefully we've given you guys some food for thought. I'm really grateful you came up and broke this down, AR. I was so interested in what you were going to say about these documents and after Steve Gonzalez's interview last night. I'd like to just make sure I'm thanking the chat. You were incredible tonight. This conversation just kept us going up here. And also thank you to my mods. Like I said before, I've been out and about all day. I didn't give any real notice to my mods for this live stream. And I just really appreciate you showing up and keeping the chat classy. It's a tough one. We were going over really sensitive subjects tonight. Before I thank the viewers, I have to just take a moment and thank you, AR. This was such an amazing show. I learned a lot. I appreciate you coming up here. I know you have so much going on in your real life, and for you to take the time to come talk to us is very, we're all very humbled that you did so. So thank you. And if my viewers could please just go visit AR's channel and give him a sub, give him a like. Please let him know that we sent you, but go check out his channel. If you've enjoyed what he had to say, he's got a channel devoted to information on the IDAHO4, and you'll love his videos. And lastly, before I toss it to you for you to tell us what's coming up in your channel this week, I just want to take a moment to thank our viewers. So, you know, a channel is not me. It's not AR. Our channels are a group of people. They're the viewers, and we know you can be anywhere. Thank you for welcoming us into your living rooms tonight. And we are nothing without you. So thank you so much for your viewership. And AR, I'll let you end the live stream.
I don't know about that, but I definitely appreciate everybody for being here. And Kiki, thanks for the invite, especially on your special day, your birthday. I definitely thank your husband for allowing you to spend some time with us, because I know this is a very important day, and one that you're very family built, and you know you love your husband and your dog. So it's always great to spend some quality time with you as a friend and as what I consider to be a sister-brother relationship. So I'm thankful for that. As for my channel, I don't know really right now what my plans are, or what I have coming up, or what I don't. I guess keep your eyes peeled. There may be some new content that comes out, or maybe there won't be. I don't know. I just don't know. But definitely thank all of you for being here. And thank you again, Kiki, for having me on with you.
Good. And hopefully, and again, this is only if AR's feeling well enough tomorrow. We're not going to hold his feet to the fire, but hopefully we're going to have AR, I can't even freaking talk straight anymore. Hopefully AR and I will be back tomorrow to actually cover this document in its entirety, because we read a page and a half and we just had 45 minutes of conversation. So there's a lot to be said about this. And with that, I'll let you go. I hope you guys have a great Friday night, and thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.